So, you finally decided you wanted to start making stuff, but you aren't sure how to start. Should you build a table, or a mailbox, or maybe a birdhouse? Do you go to start a project only to realize you don't have the right tools? In this video, I'll go over some basic tools that you should buy that won't become irrelevant as you grow older and as your skills grow. The first tool you should buy in your journey to making stuff is a saw. Now this might sound obvious to some, but you will have a really hard time making stuff if you can't cut your work pieces. Now, what kind of saw do I recommend? Should you buy one of those saws that come with the miter boxes you see on the big box stores? While you could use those, I recommend getting yourself one of these Japanese Ryoba saws. This may look different than what you are used to, but it's easy to use. I chose the stylus saw for a couple of reasons. The first is that you basically get two saws in one. As you can see, both sides of the saw have teeth. One side is used for cutting across boards, known as crosscut, while the other is used for cutting down the board, known as ripping. Having both kinds of saw teeth means you don't have the trouble of having the wrong kind of saw. Another reason I chose this saw is that it's easier to use than their Western counterparts. Western and Japanese saws have different cutting geometries. Western saws cut on the push stroke. Now there are a few advantages to cutting on the push stroke, but the biggest one is control. Cutting on the push stroke offers more control as you are cutting. The downside to Western saws is that you need to be relatively skilled to use one right. Since it offers much more control, it is easy to accidentally start cutting off of your line. This could get really frustrating for a beginner just getting started. Western saws are also often thicker. Since you are pushing through the board, the saw wants to bend with the force, requiring Western saws to either be thicker or have a back on them. Since the saw is thicker, it is cutting more wood, resulting in you having to push harder, causing the cut to be off. In contrast, Japanese saws cut on the pull stroke. This allows the saw to be way thinner because it is under tension, keeping the saw from bending. Because you are sawing towards yourself, you can put more weight into the saw than a Western saw. With Western saws, there's a lot of rotating your body to make the cut, but with Japanese saws, you can pull with both your arms and your body weight. This makes it great for smaller or older people. Another advantage or downside for some people is that Japanese saws are harder to control. Now this might sound like a downside, but hear me out. Japanese saws are harder to steer in the cut, but that also means if you start the cut straight, for the most part, it'll stay straight. It takes a lot of headache out of trying to steer the saw while cutting. Now that you have a saw, you need a way to mark lines on your board showing where to cut. This is where the next item comes in. The Humble Speed Square. This tool is commonly used for construction, but it's an amazing tool to have in the workshop. The first thing you can do with it is mark a 90-degree line on your board. Just being able to do that would be great, but this little thing is feature-packed. You can also cut other common angles, such as 45, 10, 15, 20, and so on. Speed squares can also mark down the length of a board. It does this by using these notches. Speed squares have these notches on different spacings, but mine is a 1/4 inch spacing. With this notch, I can draw a perfect line down the board with the speed square. Squares can also be used to check the squareness of your work. I mocked up this board to show you how it's done. Obviously, I didn't mock it up very well, because I'm very out of square. Clamps are useful for holding down your workpieces. Holding down your work securely can be hard with just your body. They can also be used for holding your workpieces together while you are assembling them. So what kind of clamp do I recommend for someone just starting out? A pair of quick clamps are great to start out with. I would go for the 12-inch if you can afford it. Quick clamps are good for general use. They clamp hard enough to hold your work, but not too hard that you damage it. The next item on the list is a hammer. A hammer is useful for many different things. They may look simple, but hammers are essential for any workshop. They can be used for tapping parts in place, nailing things together, and prying work to move it. For our applications though, it will mainly be for nailing two things together. But what kind of hammer should you buy? Well, I wish there was a universal answer. That really depends on the work you plan on doing. Let me run through the hammers that I have in the workshop. If you just plan on working around the house and doing odd jobs, a claw hammer will work just fine. They have a head on one side and a claw on the other side. The claw has a slit down the middle to use for pulling nails. You can get these anywhere. You probably already have one in your toolbox. This is a ball peen hammer. It is usually used in metalworking for riveting things together. The ball head is used for deforming metal. If you do end up doing any metal work, I highly recommend getting yourself one. The last hammer I will show you is a double-sided mallet. Mallets are great for hitting finished pieces without damaging them. This mallet has replaceable faces for different heads. You can put on a soft face for more delicate work, or a hard face for heavy hitting. Mallets are great for when you want to hit something but not damage it. Honestly speaking, this next tool should be so obvious that I didn't want to give it a spot on the list, which is why I only have it here. A measuring tape is required to make stuff, obviously. You make it by with just guessing the length of a board, or by using already cut pieces as a reference, but the limitations will show itself really fast. Most lengths of wood come in 16-foot pieces, so it's great to have one that's slightly above 16 feet, and this is the next one up. I will say, though, that it's awfully big and awfully bulky, and it may seem like a nuisance to have on you at all times. So if you can, I would recommend getting 3 different kinds of measuring tapes: a 6-foot, a 16-foot, and a 25-foot. You'll use the 6-foot most often, the 16-foot less often, but more than you might realize, and you really only use the 25-foot for the big stuff. But if you can only get one, I highly recommend just getting a 25-foot. The last item on my list is actually a power tool, a drill to be specific. This is the only power tool that doesn't have a decent hand-powered alternative. I mean, there are hand drills in this sense, but you'll get sick of the craft if this is the only way to drill holes. Drills have many uses in your shop you may not realize. The first use of a drill is to drill holes. Shocker. Drilling a hole is more complicated than it sounds. For example, how do you drill a hole without a drill? Well, there are some options. They're either slow, require strength, or both. On the other hand, with a drill, you can just hold the trigger and it effortlessly drills you a hole. Another use for drills is driving screws. Again, driving screws is the most basic of tasks that you might just think could use a screwdriver. But I ask you this, if you have 20, 30, or 40 screws to do, are you really going to do all those by hand? Drills allow you to complete these repetitive tasks faster and less strain on your body. Drills also have many attachments to use with them. I mean, all a drill is a motor in which you attach things to. One attachment I have is a 90-degree drill attachment. This allows me to drill or drive somewhere my drill couldn't reach by itself. There are plenty of other attachments that also replicate many other power tools, though I haven't tested those. While you could start making stuff with less tools than this, you will get frustrated with the craft when you can't do certain tasks because you don't have the right tool. Ask yourself this: would you rather cheap out on tools and get frustrated, or would you buy the right tool for the right job and enjoy making stuff? Because in the end, if you aren't enjoying what you're doing, why are you doing it? Thanks for watching.